Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
We are back with our friend Jesse Poppick, who's here as a consultant, as a coach, as a awesome guy, sex educator. He's got so much under his belt in life, and he's helping so many people with his courses, with his one-on-ones, and he's also very honest, known as an honesty coach. Welcome back, Jesse. How are you?
I'm good, Jill. Good to be back. Appreciate the intro. And today, I like that you left sort of the intro with the last word being honest. And today, that's what I want to talk about today.
All right, about being honest. What is honesty, Jesse?
Yeah, what is honesty, Jill? This is a great question, and I really appreciate in previous conversations your willingness to what I imagine to be really honest and really like, no holds barred. And I really
people might say that's a good thing. Others think that's horrible, right? You got two different opinions, but I'd rather be honest than lie.
Yeah, I'd rather be honest than lie as well. And I think that there's a distinction that needs to be made between, being honest and being brutally honest. I think that some people, rush to this idea that brutal honesty is great, and I'm not a believer in that approach. I imagine that brutal honesty is me just giving you my opinion about how I feel about what you've done or what you're doing, and then bailing, right? I just give you a mouthful of crap. And this is, to me, is brutal honesty. And I think that there can be an approach to honesty that doesn't necessarily have to be quite so harsh. And keep in mind too that the harshness is usually in the eyes of the receiver of the honesty, right? Jill, if you were being honest with me and you were doing it in a kind and attentive and intentional way, even if you were expressing maybe something that was making you angry, it would really be on me to deal with how I process that.
True. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. And I might be really reactive. I might get really angry, or I might get really sad. And that is, I guess, where the saying "the truth hurts" comes from. Right. Mm-hmm. You haven't actually done anything wrong by being honest with me. I just have to process it and deal with what it is you're telling me. Now, again, I do.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's a way to do it that doesn't have to be brutal. And I think that you and I are both New Yorkers. I think that there's a lot of New Yorkers who just realize, who just say something like, "I'm brutally honest. I'm New York honest," and there's something to that. I will say that in my life experience, that New Yorkers do tend to be a bit more open and honest than
blunt. People. I call it blunt.
Well, see, so there's the difference. So bluntness can be received, as you said, it can be received well or not so well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I do think, and the other thing too, Jill, is like from the time we're children, we're taught to lie. I mean, we're taught to lie in order to have the big people in our lives take care of us, and we fall into line because we need our parents or our tribe or whoever who's taking care of us to take care of us. And if we are blunt and honest all the time, there's a risk that, we might get excluded from the group, kicked out of the house or whatever. So I would argue that we are trained from the time we're very little to lie and not be honest. And so even this idea that we have about what is honesty, for those folks who stake a claim and say, "Yeah, I'm a really honest person," I question that. I wonder what that's about. And again,
some people then become so obsessed with the whole "I'm so honest" thing, and then that becomes like this whole ego thing. I'm so honest, and then it's like, really, is it about you being honest? About you want to tell everyone that you like being honest? That's a whole nother show. Yeah, that's an ego thing, but yeah.
No, it's true, and I think that really being honest can break your ego. And that you have to get over your ego to really be honest, because it's scary as shit. I mean, as an adult person, it can be really scary to be honest. We might feel really comfortable being honest up to a certain point, and then after that point, whatever that point might be, it's different for everyone, I imagine. But after that point, it suddenly becomes a little, I'm not really sure. I don't want to hurt your feelings, right? Or I start taking into consideration stories that about how you're going to receive this. So maybe it's better if I just say nothing.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a distinction that needs to be made clear as well, right? Honesty isn't exclusively in the realm of lying. Honesty also is in the realm of withholding.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? Because I'm not really being honest with you if I'm withholding something from you. I'm not lying about it, but I'm lying by omission.
I like that.
You
Lying by
know,
omission. Yeah.
lying by omission, and I think that's where a lot of us fall into a category of on a pretty regular basis. It's not that not that I'm actively telling you big lies or little lies. I'm actively not telling you anything,
Mm-hmm.
and by not telling you what's really happening for me, I would argue I'm lying by withholding.
Yeah.
Right. This has been this as an adult man in the U.S. It's amazing to me that it took me about 50 years to understand that the omission stuff. Yeah, I'm not lying to your face, although maybe I am, and in some cases it's what I'm not telling you that's actually really fucking me up.
Yeah.
And in 2018, I read this book that was recommended to me by the woman who's now my ex-wife. But at the time, we were going through a pretty lengthy breakup. It took us several years to work through our breakup. And in 2018, she read this book called Radical Honesty.
Mm-hmm.
And I read it too, and it was like, wow, it was life-changing. There were elements to the book where I felt like I could have written that. Have you ever read a book where you're like, like these thoughts resonate so clearly with me, it's almost like coming from me.
I wrote the book.
Right? I mean, so that happened to me several times in reading this book, and there were other times in reading this book where I was like, this is a load of shit.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was a mixed bag. And after reading it, though, I was moved enough to look more into who the guy who wrote the book. His name is Brad Blanton. Who he is, what he was about. It turns out there's a whole website called radicalhonesty.com, and there are workshops. There are actually workshops that happen all over the world all year long. And I was completely blown away by that opportunity. That like, okay, so this is a philosophy, but also it's a practice. And I had no idea. I just thought, oh, this is a really interesting book. But there's actually groups of people who get together and put that philosophy into action. And so in 2019, my wife at the time and I went and did a couples radical honesty workshop. We flew to Finland in order to do that, which was pretty exciting. Yeah, that was kind of cool. And
good and bad. I mean, if things went bad, it wouldn't be so good.
That's true.
How did it go?
Long flight home. No, it actually went really, really well.
Good.
It went really, really well. We both learned a lot. We both learned a lot about ourselves. We both learned a lot about us as a couple. We were the only Americans. We also were the only couple who actively lived together. Every other couple, and they all were Europeans, had two places to live. Like they didn't all live together. And this was one of the first things that caught our eye. I was like, wow, so are we the weirdos?
Mm-hmm.
That we feel like we have to live together all the time? And we actually, one of the things that was a result of that workshop was we came back to New York and got a second apartment.
Wow.
Now, whether that precipitated our eventual breakup or not, one could argue either way. But I do like the idea that, you know what, from a relationship standpoint, we fall into patterns, and living together is one of them. I remember being a young man and couldn't wait to live with a partner for the first time. Like, this was like an achievement. And I'm not sure that it's always the best approach. Some people can live together really well, and also you can live together really well and still want to have your own space, have your own alone time. I think that's overlooked with relationships here in the US in particular, but all over the world. Anyway, Brad's work is really interesting. I have been involved as a participant and as someone who's taken a training path towards eventually becoming a trainer. There's a process to that. Radical Honesty as an organization right this minute today is in a bit of upheaval. There's a lot of internal strife. Is it a psychological cult? What is its intentions? Are people being harmed by being honest and the way the workshops are conducted? So there's a lot of internal questioning within the organization. And it is an organization, it's a community of people that I know mostly in Europe, but also Americans and all over the world who are attempting to be more honest. And it is steeped in this philosophy that Brad developed. I think the first pillar of his idea is that he was a therapist in DC for a really long time. So his clients were politicians and lawyers and all kinds of different people. And he found that most people were suffering because they were withholding. Like in his experience as a therapist, that most people's pain and suffering came from their inability to say what was actually on their mind. And this caused so much internal pain and suffering that some people, got heart disease or got cancer, or he likes to associate the idea of that lying is the primary cause of suffering and that we can die from this, right? I imagine this is also selling some sense of urgency. And I'm not sure I buy that 100%, but I certainly know that in my experience, that I certainly created a lot of suffering for myself by not being willing to be honest with my partners and with the people in my life. So it's a tough, and again, I think it's a tough one because we think we're making the better decision to not tell you something. I don't want to hurt your feelings. I'm trying to be sensitive to how you'll take this. But if I don't tell you what this is, then what are you working with? Are you working with the full deck, or am I holding a few cards back? Right? How can you, as my partner or as my friend or as my coworker, even be able to make clear decisions if I'm not actually revealing what's on the table?
True self. Yeah. Okay.
Right? So one of the approaches to dealing with radical honesty also, and this is a really key element, is the difference between, or I should say, distinguishing between noticing and thinking. We spend a lot of time up here thinking, and Brad likes to take the approach, or I should say radical honesty wants to take the approach of like separating what's actually happening. Like I'm looking at the screen, I see you, I'm sitting in this chair, I feel my ass in the seat. These are all things that I know are happening, right? But the stories that I make up in my mind about you or about the computer or about what I'm going to do later today, that's just stories. Like that's not based on any reality. It's based on ideas that I have. And a lot of times I imagine we buy our own ideas and we believe our own ideas when maybe they don't serve us so well. Like maybe we're coming up with these ideas and these stories based on how we're feeling, not actually what's happening. And this to me is a huge part of this. Again, 50 years before I realized, oh yeah, that's right. Fuck, I spoon feed myself these ideas all day long. And most of them I've just completely made up. And I'm making decisions based on these made up ideas and stories that I have. So the idea of really distinguishing between what I'm thinking and what's actually happening, like the noticing and thinking. And that idea is packaged in this approach to being honest through what we call the awareness continuum. So the awareness continuum is pretty straightforward. It's what I kind of said before. There's really only 3 areas as a human being that I can be aware of. 3 areas being what's happening in my body, right? I feel my hands on my stomach. Maybe I feel sweaty. So my body is physically telling me things that I can be aware of. I can be aware of you on the screen. I can be aware of you're smiling or laughing or waving, right? And this is happening, right?
Yeah.
So this is all true. And then the third one, so we have the inside, we have the outside, and then the third area of awareness is the upside down, what's happening in our head. And being able to distinguish between those 3 things, what's happening with my body, what's happening out in the real world, and then what's happening inside my head, this can be really challenging to separate those 3 things for ourselves, right? Especially because if we listen to what's going on in our heads most of the time, we may not be paying attention to what's happening in our body. We may not even be being aware or paying attention to what's happening outside in the real world. I mean, how many times have you been asked, how are you doing? And you answer, I'm fine, but your stomach is like, right?
Then there's times when I'm so honest and it's like the person's face goes, well, I just asked how you're doing. I'm like, yeah, but it's really not good. So I'm just letting you know that I don't want to lie. It really sucks. And they're like, they don't know what to say. So I kind of learned to lie and say, I'm fine.
No, but you see, that's the problem. We've been trained to lie and say this bullshit that you're fine when you're not.
Guilty. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. And we've all done it. That's what we're trained to do. And again, you being honest about how you're doing, how that lands in the other person, they're the ones who are having a reaction to you being honest. You asked me how I'm doing. I'm telling you the truth. oh, I'm sorry this makes you uncomfortable, but this is not my problem. This sounds like a you problem.
Yep.
If you ask the question, I'm being honest with you, how you receive that, well, maybe next time, think before you ask that question. Are you really interested in hearing the answer? Or are you really interested in hearing the truth when you ask me that question? Yeah. Part of the honesty part two is that it's a means to an end. You know, that getting over our expressions of anger or even attraction, that we can get over these feelings, and that we maybe can come to a place of forgiveness. That's kind of the goal, if there is one, to this radical honesty practice, is eventually getting to a place of forgiveness. And it's not always possible. My second ex-wife has not forgiven me, and I doubt that she will. She's made it clear that she's decided she's not going to. And you know, so it's not guaranteed. And I think forgiveness is one of the things that we can gain from being honest. Is giving the other person, again, the opportunity to really see who you are, and then they can decide, I'm going to forgive you or not. And also that there's a lot of attachment to honesty around negativity, around anger. And there's a couple of things I want to say about that. We also are attached to lying about our attractions to people and our actual appreciations of people. So not only, we might actually be, especially being New Yorkers, we might be ready to say fuck you to someone who gets in my way much more readily than we're able to say, wow, I really like you, or I'm really attracted to you. That we lie about that also. That we, again, I'm not going to tell you I find you attractive, Jill, because, you know, I might make you uncomfortable, or I might get sweaty, or right. So I opt not to. So I want to be clear that this approach to honesty isn't just around the negative and around expressing their anger, but also the positive.
True.
Right. We tend to put people on pedestals, whether we're angry at them, we put them up here so I can get angry. We put them up here if we appreciate them. And we're all just people. Right. So the pedestal doesn't really ever work in anyone's favor. It really it allows for a lot of dysfunction, as opposed to bringing you back down to my level. And now we can just talk as human beings. And so part of the practice is also to get over our anger, but also to get over our appreciations. And I don't mean get over them to get rid of them, but to get over them to equalize the playing field, so to speak. Right? And this is also really challenging. I think we tend to be more ready to be honest about our anger in some ways than our attractions to people or our appreciations for people. And I will tell you this too. I mean, again, I grew up in New York City. New Yorkers, so far in my experience, Italians and New Yorkers tend to be the most honest when it comes to expressing their anger.
Yeah. A lot of hot tempers. Yep.
And if you're an Italian from New York, or a New Yorker who's an Italian, you've probably got a lot of heat there. And in my experience doing these radical honesty workshops, and I've done quite a few, is that there are a lot of people who don't get angry, who have been told their whole lives not to get angry. And witnessing someone in a container with a group of people where they're allowed to explore their anger for the first time is one of the most highly impactful human experiences I've ever had. And I did not realize until I started doing this work how many people don't allow themselves to get angry. They don't know how to express their anger. They've stuffed it down for decades. This to me was a shock, because I was raised here. I was raised with a family that allowed me to get angry and express my anger, and with the reassurances that there would be no love lost, that my parents would still love me, that I could still love them and express the anger. This was a healthy part of my childhood, I imagine. There were parts that weren't so healthy, but expression of anger was accepted. And I am constantly in awe of people who come to these workshops who were not raised that way. And we all have our own issues and our own problems, but this inability to safely express anger, really moving. Quite honestly, like, all but honestly, but like in the workshops, but I mean, like, I can't even express to you in words, Jill, like how powerful it is to watch someone, you know, slightly raise their voice for the first time. let alone like have a full expression of anger and like have the feeling that they have. I'm getting tingles in my arms just talking about it. And that's the other thing too, is that relating back to what's happening in your body and talking about that, like like paying attention to what your body is telling you. So that if you are really happy or you're really sad or you're really angry, that your body is also like part of that expression, that you can say, yeah, I'm feeling tingles, or I'm feeling sweaty, or I tighten my throat. Like that can also be part of the expression of that honesty. Your body's a part of it.
Got it. Jesse Poppick, just to let you know, if you are tuning in, we should establish we are talking to Jesse Poppick. And how do we reach you?
Well, the website is jessepoppick.com. JESSEPOPPICK.com. I can't believe we've already blown through 23 minutes. I know.
We still got 3 minutes left. Go for it.
We got a few minutes left.
Yes,
so email me at you@jessepoppick.com. Check out the website. I do honesty coaching. I do sexuality coaching. I do sales coaching. And next week, I actually want to speak with you about incorporating honesty in sales.
Okay.
Because this is, again, I think a topic that people have that type of reaction, like, whoa, you're going to talk about honesty?
Well, I think about car salesmen. I do. And I know some really good, kind ones, but I know some really leechy, like dirty, like lying type ones. And I'm like, I'm a good censor of people when you walk in, but that's a whole nother approach with sales. Like, do you approach the client? Do you let them have their space? Do you be aggressive? Do you not? It's like, just be you. But I hate salespeople that are too pushy, that are too. Some people though need that to kind of get their claws in, and it makes a sale. I get it, but I'm not that.
Yes,
person.
I would argue that no. I'm going to make a whole discussion with you next week.
Oh, good.
Around that idea that like, yeah, no, there's probably better ways to sell stuff to people.
All right, we'll talk about it, Jesse.
Good.
So Jesse, in the meantime, if we do want to reach out to you, do you offer initial consultation, a discovery call with someone?
Absolutely, free consultation. You can, if you go to the website, jessepoppick.com, you can easily sign up for a half-hour consultation. We can see, we can find out what's going on for you. We can check each other out enough to see if it makes sense to work together and on what, and go from there. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jesse. Have a fantastic day. And to everyone else, stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.